Hello, my name is Crystal Dahl, and I am the Online Communications Manager here at Meritas. I would like to welcome and thank each of you for joining us on today's webinar, The Peace Process in Colombia. For those of you who are new to Meritas, Meritas is an established global alliance of closely connected yet independent law firms that each offer a full range of high-quality, specialized legal services. We were built upon a rigorous system for monitoring and enhancing the quality of our member firms and have been connecting clients with carefully qualified business legal expertise in 240 markets around the world since 1990. Meritas' capability webinars are regularly presented by Meritas members. Before we get started, I'd like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items. Meritas now offers the ability to listen to our webinars through your computer speakers. If at any time you have any difficulty hearing the presentation, you may call into the associated telephone line instead. All phone lines will be muted. If you experience any technical difficulties, please press *0 at any time to connect with a support technician. You can also use the chat feature to reach out to me, and I will help you work through those. Since you will be muted, if you have a question, please ask via the chat feature found on the left-hand side of your screen. Jose plans to answer questions at the end of the presentation. Lastly, in the next few days, I will distribute a copy of the presentation, a recording of the webinar, as well as Jose's contact details. Our presenter today, Jose Alejandro Torres, is a partner of our Colombian Meritas member firm, Pace Herrera Ruiz. His practice focuses on mergers and acquisitions and corporate law. He co-heads the compliance practice group and co-heads the real estate development and trust practice group. Jose has experience representing several local and international clients in corporate matters, mergers and acquisitions, financial structures, and foreign investments. In addition, he has specific experience in the design, structuring, and development of real estate projects, including shopping centers, hotels and resorts, agricultural projects, and housing developments, among others. With that, Jose, are you ready to get started?
I'm ready.
All right, it's all yours.
Okay. Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, everyone, for signing to the webinar. On the housekeeping rules, I would prefer to have questions at the end, but if you have the pressing need of making a question, please go ahead and I will answer those. Okay? So the peace process in Colombia is just taking around, for us Colombian, around 3 to 4 years of our lives, and it's finally coming to a very important milestone date. But to understand the Colombian peace process, one needs to focus on the second half of the 20th century and look back to the relevant historical background. As a premise, historical fact for Colombia, Colombia has traditionally been a bipartisan political system where we have liberals and conservatives. The liberals are more like to the Democratic Party in the U.S., while the conservatives are more, you can associate it more with the Republican Party. It has been a history of unrest, but the more discernible date where the Colombian conflict, the experts normally identify it as the very first, the very primary milestone date is April 9, 1948. That is the date when a very populist liberal presidential candidate, who is the name of Jorge Eliezer Gaitán, was killed in the streets of Bogota. He was assassinated in the very downtown area of Bogota. At that time, the ruling party was the conservative party, was the other party. And after the death of Jorge Eliezer Gaitán at 1 p.m. April 9, everything went violent. The mob, the liberal mob, almost destroyed Bogota. The liberal mob almost took control of the presidential palace, and it's called historically it's known as the Bogotazo, and it marks the preceding part of the violence in Colombia. It was called the violence period. It was a violence between the two parties. The ruling party was the conservative party. The liberal party was, to a certain extent, being exterminated by the army, and violence all over the country ensued. By there's rivers of ink describing the very, very violent period. By 1950, Laureano Gómez, a very ultra-conservative candidate, took office as president, and it only made matters worse. And the violence became so violent, so intense, that even the political parties, the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party, decided it was time to take action. And the action took the form of convincing a general of the army, Gustavo Rojas Pinilla, to lead a coup over Laureano and take power back in 1952. Then, for 7 years, we had a dictator, a military dictator, and it all went well until such time, and it appears to happen with all dictators. The dictator was not willing, or was reticent to leave power, and then the political parties met again and struck a deal. The deal they struck is called the Frente Nacional, and they agreed that they would have a new coup, but a political coup, a non-military coup over Gustavo Rojas Pinilla, and the two political parties would share the power, meaning that every 4 years we had, quote-unquote, free elections, but both parties had one single candidate. For the first term, it was a liberal president. For the next term, is a conservative president, and so on and so forth for 16 years. And the ministers or secretaries were divided half rigorously, 50% conservative, 50% liberals. That went very well until perhaps the third election, when everybody now realized that the only real possibility to get into power is to be member of one of the traditional parties. And that created that the formerly now at that point unemployed liberal peasant fighters, now and please bear in mind that we're in the 60s, in the middle of the 60s, in the middle of the Cold War, and after Cuba, the Cuban Revolution. So by the mid-60s, those that were left out embraced the communist ideology and started a guerrilla warfare movement, and that is when, 1960s, that we have the FARC ELN. FARC is Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia. ELN is Ejército de Liberación Nacional, and the M19. We had have a myriad of other small guerrilla groups, and those guerrilla groups were Marxist, Leninist, following the Mao Zedong doctrine. We are talking heavily communist guerrillas. Not very successful, by the way, military speaking. They were in the rural areas. At the beginning, they were only a faction, a handful of guerrillas. Nonetheless, there was a very first attempt back in 1982 to reach a peace deal with the FARC, with Belisario Betancourt. There was pardons and amnesties issued. They demobilized around 10% of the group, but lo and behold, did not succeed, and the guerrillas went back to activity. There's two basic reasons for that. One, FARC in the 1980s, as a result of the Belisario Betancourt peace process, formed a proper political party called Unión Patriótica, leftist, but it was a legal political party running with their own presidential candidate, their own candidates for Senate, and they were practically wiped out, meaning they were killed by the very active right-wing paramilitary groups. Is one of the more bloodier events of our history, the 1980s decimation of the Unión Patriótica. They killed the presidential candidate. They killed the council individuals and persons. It was a very violent period of time, which, by the way, coincided with the surge of drug trafficking in Colombia. We're talking now late 1980s, the time of Pablo Escobar. This was one of the darkest periods in our history. So the FARC not only have no incentives to go into political life because they were being actually killed, but there was a more profitable business of not going formal, and this was drug trafficking. So that served as both factors, in my mind, meant that the FARC not only did not disappear as a guerrilla movement, but it grew stronger. The only thing that should be mentioned here is that by March 1990, amidst this violent period, the other big guerrilla group, M19, did execute a peace deal, which stands to date and is proven very successful, historically speaking, and led to something that you don't see in this slide, which I, by the way, forgot. The M19 peace agreement led to the enactment of a new constitution back in 1991, which history pundits referred to as the 1990s Peace Accord. We had back in the 1990s a number of attempts to reach a negotiated peace deal with Gaviria, Ernesto Samper, and most notably, I'm missing one here. Here we go. The most notable attempt was the 1998-2002 under the presidency of Andrés Pastrana, the Caguán peace process, where the FARC were led to control almost one of the states of Colombia, the size of I think Rhode Island, something of the sort, where the troops, the Colombian government troops, were not in. Government officials did not go in. It was under total control of FARC. With President Andrés Pastrana tried very hard to reach an agreement with FARC. There were negotiations over 2-3 years, and once the FARC during the negotiations kidnapped an airplane and kidnapped one political individual in the plane, and they landed the plane in an open road very near to the demilitarized zone, the peace process was finalized. Andrés Pastrana is known for that failure, but it's also known for one very big success. That was that at the same time he was negotiating with FARC, he flew up to the U.S. and asked for funding, military assistance, and he got it in the form of what they call the Plan Colombia. The Plan Colombia is a U.S.-sponsored military assistance and fund program that helped to rebuild, professionalize Colombian army, change tactics, and have a stronger army. By the time that the Caguán peace process fell apart, we had a strong Colombian army, and we had a very strong FARC force. It was, at its peak, it was 20,000 strong. By 2002, we had Álvaro Uribe Vélez elected as president in a landslide vote. He promised a hard hand on guerrillas, and he did. With his democratic security policy, he almost beat, military speaking, the guerrillas. From a 20,000 strong, today, as of today, FARC is around 6,000, 5,000. Territorial control over FARC almost disappeared from a 30-something% of the total Colombian territory to around less than 5% only to the south of the border with Ecuador, where we have a Putumayo, and to the northeast, where we have the Venezuelan border, where we have the pockets of, or we had pockets of guerrillas. And during 8 years, Álvaro Uribe Vélez, although he fails to admit it openly, he tried to reach an agreement, a peaceful agreement with FARC, but at the same time he was very active, military speaking, with the force, with the army, grown and created with the Plan Colombia, which was at inception created by Andrés Pastrana. 2010, President Santos gets elected with the program of the democratic security of Álvaro Uribe, but in the middle of the game he changed dramatically and became actively engaged in the peace negotiations with FARC. Until that date, Álvaro Uribe Vélez was considered one as a pro-government official side of the president. Now, to this date, Álvaro Uribe Vélez is the more entrenched opponent of President Santos. He leads a new party, which is the opposing party of the government control parties. So we had a very dramatic switch of tables back in 2000 and something, 2012. So that's the we had a long history of violence. That's not a secret. There was a heavy debate on the need of having a peace talks with a very weak, by then very weak guerrilla group. But if you hear the speech or the logic between of which we have in our firm, we have had the elite negotiators give us to explain the rationale and the logic. And the rationale and logic, which I will explain later, is that if Colombia never fails to address the structural causes of violence, it would never overcome violence. If Colombia does not address the roots of why Colombians fight each other, Colombians will continue to fight each other, and the military success, although can be tangible, it would not be long lasting, because the issues creating violence will not have been resolved. That is the logic between or the motive when you hear these guys talk. And to a certain extent, these guys tell you the peace process is an accident. It will give us an excuse to actually introduce structural reform to the Colombian economy, to the Colombian political structure, and to the social environment of Colombia. And under this, the excuse or pretext of and I'll explain later how does this take form. We will make the very intense and deep reforms that Colombia need, which in normal times or otherwise we will not be able to make, because we will have political opposition. So the specific background of the peace agreement with FARC is between 2012 and up till 2016. There were negotiations. There were 5-point agenda, which we will touch upon later. And the President Santos said that, and this is somewhat contradictory. He said the peace deal will need to be approved by the popular vote of all Colombians. Okay, so he signed the agreement, the peace accord, and he put it to a plebiscite vote in October 2nd, 2016. And lo and behold, he lost. He lost, albeit for a very narrow margin, from 50 to 49, 50.2 to 49.7. They lost. The Colombians said no, and they said no for many reasons. Many could not forget the atrocities of war. Many could not forget that the FARC had kidnapped and killed many people. But technically speaking, if you read into the detail of the agreement with FARC, there were certain things that made people very nervous. And they made very nervous due to the fact that it felt that the Colombia was agreeing. And by the way, it's not only agreeing, but the agreement, and there's a discussion now, will be made part of the Colombian Constitution. So it will be built in stone into the Colombian legal system, and it felt that it was too far left, and we were going too much the Venezuelan way. That the deal was too communist or too leftist, and there were certain things that would need to be. And Alvaro Uribe, who opposed and won, by the way, the plebiscite, he said, I do not oppose peace. I do oppose certain aspects of the agreement, which I propose to be amended and restated. The official position is this is what it is. We cannot change the agreement, and if you don't vote, yes, we will go back to war. History shows us that Uribe was right. He won, and the agreement was improved, or quote-unquote improved in certain aspects, which we will touch upon later, and the amended and restated FARC agreement, very naively, people were expecting to have a new popular vote to vote on the new amended and restated agreement, but it was not the case. President Santos preferred to sign the amended and restated, and instead of putting to a popular vote, he put it with approval of Colombian Congress, which, by the way, the official parties control, and it was approved in December 1st. So we had a amended and restated renegotiation and reapproval of the initial draft, so to speak, in 1 month, in November. It was approved, and the Constitutional Court in December accepted that the approval by Colombian Congress was valid and enforceable, so there was an endorsement of the indirect approval of the Colombian people through Congress of the agreement, and it made other approvals. The FARC agreement has an ancillary agreement that Colombian Constitution and Colombian laws will need to be changed in order to adjust the Colombian legal system to the past peace deal, and it's called a fast track. It normally takes around 2 years to change the Constitution. Around 16 congressional debates, it's reduced to half. Everything is reduced to half, so we would have everything approved on a fast track basis very rapidly. We have a flood of new laws, of new decrees on land reform, political participation, so on and so forth, and they're trying to change things that were not provided in the FARC peace deal, and so it's a hectic environment, politically speaking, approving left and right things. We have now the guerrillas demobilized. They are concentrated in certain areas of the country, and the whole thing is rolling and initiating full steam ahead with FARC. I mentioned earlier that the peace deal of FARC tries to address the very core reasons or causes for violence in Colombia. Generally speaking, in Colombia, as it may be in any other part in Latin America or the emerging economies, we had a very acute inequality system. The rich are very, very rich, and the poor are very, very poor. And that is more evident in the rural areas, where the farmers are very, very poor, and land is owned by very, very few. So the peace agreement of FARC, one of the very basic components, is that there needs to be a very deep land reform in Colombia. The other big causes, or very basic causes of violence in Colombia, is the exclusion nature of the political system in Colombia. Only very few can participate of power. And it's evident of the fact, for example, President Santos is the grandson or grandniece of a former president. We have had father and son and relatives as presidents, the Santos dynasty, the Meritas dynasty, Laureano Gomez family also. So it's very close. It's a very close club, and that generates violence. So it is one of the big issues that needs to be addressed is enhanced political participation. And the other very acute problem is drug trafficking, which it boils down very intimately joined by the poverty in the rural areas, where the growing cocaine is the only way of life. So it's the only way of life, and the lack of control on drug trafficking and the funding of political parties and the corruption that generates drug trafficking is seen as one of the very big causes of violence in Colombia. So not surprisingly, one very important chapter of the peace deal with FARC is the integral rural reform. You will see in the slide the agreed measures, but it basically, I would like to draw your attention. Let me see if I can. To the land fund. The idea is to create a land fund with approximately 3 million hectares of area. That's approximately 2.5% of the whole Colombian territory, and give it to very poor peasants or farmers in order to recover unproductive land, and at the same time giving opportunities to the farmers to work the land on licit crops, not illicit crops. And this was one of the very things that sounded very Venezuelan. The land fund. They were going to get 3 million hectares from vacant land lots, from land lots to be recuperated from criminals, and expropriation. One thing that the original agreement with FARC lacked, which was included in the restated version, is that in the original agreement, if you took the agreement and searched private property, it made 0 findings. The expression private property was not mentioned in the chapter of integral rural reform, and that led to the political speech by opposition that this is Venezuela. They will get all your land. They will be state farms, and everybody will be on the USSR 1920s. Everybody's working in state farms, and so that was one of the. And it was true. You read the agreement, and there was never a mention of private property. So they said no. It was not necessary to mention private property because we were not touching private property. But on the restated version, they included express mention that private property will be respected. And private property honestly acquired will be respected. and that paved the way to the approval and the amended and restated, amongst other things, which I will explain during the course of the other very important is that rural areas in Colombia are uncharted territory. Nobody knows who owns what, or where your land lot ends and the other one being. So there's a cadastral land registry map that needs to be made on rural areas, and then you will know where private property is, where vacant land lot is, where. So that is a very important measure. Sounds very basic, but we did not have a proper land map or land cadastral map of Colombia. And there are other ancillary measures such as the creation of rural jurisdiction, where farmers could raise their complaints. And if you read the literature on land reform, this is your typical land reform, which made Colombians very nervous because it lacked what I'm highlighting here in number 5, the recognition and respect of private property. By the way, the peace agreement is 300 and 400 pages long, so it takes time to read. It takes time to understand. It was drafted over 4 years by a team of 30 people. So we lawyers know when some document is drafted by a multitude of individuals, it is poorly drafted. It has a number of technical inconsistencies, but it is what it is now. Let me see if I can erase. Political participation. The other big ticket item was we need to enhance political participation. Very specifically, the motto is we will change rifles and weapons for votes. So we need the FARC to be to abandon violence and get into politics. Very important here. I need to mention the whole thing is monitored by the United Nations. We have the United Nations. It looks like Rwanda. We have everybody here looking over the whole process. And for the purposes of this discussion, FARC will become a political party as it was back in the 1980s. Remember, do not forget Unión Patriótica. So, but there will be this is a new and improved version where they will get public funding. They will get, for the first period, a minimum of seats in Senate and the House of Representatives, 5 each. And there will be a law protecting the opposition party. So it is funding from the state, minimum participation for the first term of 5, protection, and monitoring by the UN. So this will hopefully will ensure that peacefully and FARC can transition from guerrilla group to political party. We see here in this slide the end of the armed conflict. In a nutshell, we have the UN surveillance again, the monitoring, and what they have done is in a 6-month period, all the guerrillas will be concentrated in certain areas, which are called the peaceful transition areas of reincorporation to peaceful life. It's a very long name. It ended that everybody flocked, all the guerrilla group flocked. Hold on a minute. Flocked into these areas. They are now, just yesterday or the day before, the very last guerrilla member went into these areas, and within 6 months they will get checked by doctors. They will receive a subsidy, a minimum legal wage, and in 6 months all the weapons will be deposited in containers and destroyed with the verification of the UN. This is happening right now as we speak, and is moving forward. The drug trafficking problem is very, very a very, very complicated problem to solve. It is being solved by way of creating the opportunities for peasants and farmers to transition away from illegal crops towards the illicit crops, and there's programs for the development of alternative crops and implementation with fundings and subsidies. Please bear in mind that every time we mention programs, we mention subsidies, we mention funding, the peace process will cost a lot of money. So it better work, because it is costing us a lot of money, us Colombians. So everything, it is your typical substitution program of illegal crops with subsidies, funding, incentives, and they are destroying and helping to destroy the plantations of cocaine. So it is working as we speak now. The implementation and verification of public approval. This goes hand in hand with the political participation. Everyone will be entitled to review, audit through a number of programs on how the peace deal is being implemented. It will last around 10 years, the whole implementation and the verification. And again, we will have company of the UN to help us verify. This is the other very, very important part of the peace deal. We have enhanced political participation. We have rural reform, and we have what they call truth, preparation, and non-repetition. So there was a very protracted discussion on how to deal with atrocities of FARC, how they should they pay jail, should they be pardoned, and the middle point is what we call the special jurisdiction for peace. In Spanish, la Jurisdicción Especial de Paz. It's normally called HEP. HEP. It it was a very controversial part of the agreement, and let me explain why. HEP, at its essence, basically provides the following. If you are involved in the armed conflict, guerrillas, and you go and tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth under HEP, you can be sentenced to not jail, but cannot hear the speaker. Can you hear me now, Jamie Lee?
I can hear you. This is Crystal. Jose, I don't know if it's just
Okay,
me.
okay. Jamie Lee said I cannot hear the speaker. And to answer George, yes, the agreement is now binding, and we're in the implementation phase. It's executed and approved by Congress. And by the way, it was approved by the Congress of FARC. They had their own Congress, and it was approved by them also. So it is now official and binding. And I was saying that HEP said if you're a member of FARC and it only applies to the heads, to the leadership of guerrillas. The foot soldier is not on the loop. They are pardoned, and so only those responsible for planning certain very, very, very vile crimes against humanity, and including drug trafficking, they would go to HEP and say truth, all the truth and nothing but the truth, and they will get 2 to 8 years of a limitation of freedom sentence, which means you will go into what has all the likes of a farm, like with fences, but it's a farm, not a prison, and you will do your social work, your community service, in a very U.S. kind of words. And community service can be in the very, very light sentence, like it would be to help and educate people within the region, help remove cocaine crops, and if community service could include also, so we're told, the mining of mined areas, removing the mines. That sounds very. If you don't tell the whole truth, then you can get up to normal sentence with 20, 30, 60 years because you lied to HEP. And so it sounded very unjust, because the military personnel indicted of exact same wrongdoings could get a heftier sentence than that of guerrillas. So that created heavy polarization. There was an asymmetric treatment of soldiers and guerrillas, and there was mentioned that even people indirectly involved in the conflict would need to go to HEP, and that meant clearly that the Colombian business community, which in many cases, voluntary or involuntary, funded either paramilitaries or funded left-wing, could get involved and could be held accountable for HEP. That meant, and that was very controversial, made many people very uneasy, and led to the vote that we all know that won the no vote. And another thing, it was comprised of, it could have magistrates, not non-Colombian magistrates. And the decision by HEP was final and unappealable. So it created a new all-present, all-powerful court that made people very, very nervous. With foreign magistrates, and they even said, "Could you imagine yourself being held accountable or a court made up of Venezuelan magistrates or Cuban magistrates?" It was unthinkable, and it led to many people voting no. And at this point, I will draw your attention to the issues that were improved and restated in the final deal. That is what I call the amended and restated peace accord. In the integral rule reform chapter, there was an express mention of respect to private property that made many people at ease. And there was a commission of experts to review the details of the rural cadastral reform and the land fund. On the HEP, HEP could only start the initiation of new proceedings during the first 2 years. They were not any more foreign magistrates, but foreign experts giving opinions. The Colombian Constitutional Court will have the final say on the decisions of HEP. Very important that it was an isolated court, but it's within the organization of the judiciary in Colombia, where the Constitutional Court is the highest court of the land, and they will have they could strike down HEP decisions, and the state agents, meaning the army agents, and now there's another law approved that they will have a special treatment comparable to that of HEP to guerrillas. So we have soldiers and guerrillas separated, not in the same jurisdiction. Very important, something that it lacked in the first draft is that FARC, please remember, there is truth, reparation, and non-repetition. And the reparation part was absent in the first draft, and the FARC was, everyone had the perception that FARC were very rich, and they should make monetary reparations. There was no mention to that monetary reparation in the first draft, and in the second draft, where they will effectively give an inventory of all assets, and they will effectively repair victims. That was a very, very important improvement. And what we call farms, because it was not clear where the privation of liberty sentence was going to be paid, and now it's certain areas restricted with fences. They will look like prisons, but they will be in the rural areas, and they will be more lax, but there will be an effective restriction of movement. So that's something that had to be clear in the second draft, and which was approved on political participation, subsidies to be made available to the new political party were reduced by 30%. So those were the basic improvements of the second draft that were finally made that the agreement was approved. That is in general a summary of a peace agreement. The cost of the costs, it is estimated that it will cost approximately $30 $30 billion US to have everything in place over 10 years. And we are getting contributions from the European Union and the US, 450 million from the US and 475 million euros from the European Union, which, as you can see, comparing we are 29 billion short on getting the full funding of the program. But pundits measure that if we become a peaceful country, finally, we will grow at a rate of at least 5.9 on domestic gross product on a yearly basis. And that is what all Colombians are hoping for. The other big guerrilla, very quickly, we're running out of time. We have the other, remember the 60s, where we had M19, FARC, and ELN, Ejército de Liberación Nacional. We just started in Quito, February 2017, the public part of the peace talks. If it took us 4 years to reach an agreement with FARC, it seems it would take us longer to reach an agreement with the ELN. Two reasons. One, FARC was like the how do you call it, the centralized force. They have a central secretariat who issued the orders, and everybody followed. So when the secretary reached a peace deal, everybody followed, and everybody is complying. ELN is a more federalistic kind of force. It's a loose force of fronts, of groups, far away, one in the south, one in the east, one in the west, one in the north. And the central command of ELN is not as effective as FARC was, and they are much more Maoistic, very much more not as Marxist, constructive with the political. They are very hardcore Maoistic guerrilla force, very entrenched, the political, the struggle of the classes kind of force. And so we're talking a very different animal between FARC and ELN. And the starting point seems to be very, 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 very unconcrete, very, very vaporous. The 6 points of the agenda include civilian participation, peace, democracy, transformation to achieve peace, victims, implementation, very non-specific, so they could spend ages discussing. Finally, the challenges going forward. This has been an extremely divisive process for Colombia. Funding the peace process is very challenging also. We just had a new tax reform increasing the base of taxes, a more comprehensive structural tax reform. Trump, we don't know if Trump will help or not help our process. One can see that we still remain one of the more strongest allies for the U.S. within the region, and apparently Trump has accepted and recognized that. But if we tend to go the left way, maybe we will get in the wrong way or the wrong foot for Trump, and that could be counterproductive in the long term, or at least for the following 4 years. And very important, avoid derailment. We have FARC succession. There are certain fronts of FARC that is not subscribe to the peace deal. So we know now that those dissident groups will go back to drug trafficking, and it will become criminal organizations, entrenched, and they're difficult to. If they go to drug trafficking, it's very difficult to eradicate the problem, because there's economic incentive in drug trafficking on profitability. So it's very difficult to, when someone gets very rich, to become a very poor political candidate. Jamie Lee. Yes, the answer to Jamie Lee's question is yes. When we talk to clients, there's a different or 10-foot perception of the peace process in Colombia, and there's a perception that the Colombia, they don't get into the details. They know that we have a peace deal, and that means peace, and that means investment, and that means, and that is true by and large. And the perception is one very positive on not on wait and see, but rather on let's do business. And Alberto is ELN. Yes, they used to be the guards of the crops, and now they're not only the guards, but they now extract the coke and also ship the coke out. So they are in them. FARC, as it was FARC, and ELN is also very involved in drug trafficking. I think that's it. I hear now, Crystal. I don't know if anybody else has a question.
I don't see any more coming in, but I will send your contact details within the next couple days, so that if anything else comes up in the meantime, people can reach out to you directly. So
okay.
Thank you, Jose. That was a very informative presentation. It was wonderful to have the opportunity to listen to you. Also, thank you everybody for joining us. And like I said, I'll send out that email here in the next couple days with his contact details, but also with a copy of the recording in the event you wanted to share it with others or listen to it again, as well as a copy of the presentation. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Crystal.
Yep. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.